Anti-Afro Svengalis, right off the top. We're going to talk about Remix's criminal record. If you want to jump straight to the information on the arrest encounters and the outcomes, which does include 2 convictions for domestic violence or domestic assault, go right ahead. Get the timestamp below the title, and you're off and running. This is a follow-up to Smoke's live stream, where he and Keeping It Plain discussed it in introduction mode. This video is going to be specifically facts. Check out my commentary that's also going up at the same time, but the purpose of this video is to set up the commentary and give straight up facts. Here you see on the screen, I'm starting with facts. These are 19 arrest encounters that Remix had over a 15-year period. I am going to hone in on the arrests that indicate assault or domestic assault. I'm going to give you specific facts regarding what happened with those 5 arrest encounters. But before I do that, I need to do another setup. I need to give some basic information about our justice system, because obviously there are subjects out there who either never knew, maybe they don't care, maybe they forgot, whatever the case. There's a clear lack of knowledge about the very basics of our justice system, and it might come as a surprise to some. Just because someone is working in the justice system, just because they have a law license, doesn't mean they know what the hell they're doing, and it certainly doesn't mean they know what the hell they're talking about. Okay, the stages after a person has been arrested and they're proceeding to trial. These are the possibilities. They're going to take a plea. We know what not guilty is. We know what guilty is. This is before the trial starts. Then you have what's called no contest. No contest plea means a person is not admitting guilt, but they are accepting, they are acknowledging there will be no trial, and they will suffer a criminal conviction. So a no contest plea results in a guilty disposition. An Alford plea, which is not available in all states, it is available in Tennessee. An Alford plea means a person is specifically maintaining their innocence, but they recognize that the state prosecutor, whoever's trying the case, has an ironclad case, has the evidence, has the goods, and if you proceed to trial, there's a very good chance there's sufficient evidence to convict you. That is what an Alford plea is. An Alford plea, a no contest plea, a guilty plea, all have the same outcome. They mean the person has a criminal conviction. They are considered guilty in the eyes of the law. There is no mitigation. If someone says, well, it was an Alford plea I took, it was a no contest plea I took, I didn't say guilty, doesn't matter. It's still a criminal conviction. Now, we mention absentia because this is pre-trial. What ends up happening, the person absconds, they take off, they're not available, and there's a decision made. Obviously, both sides weigh in, defense, prosecutors. Then the judge decides whether or not prosecutors can proceed trying the person while they are not there. That is very high risk, because the most important aspect of a trial is the defendant being present. That's a constitutional right. That is a sacred right. Now, trials that are held when the defendant is absent occur when the evidence is so overwhelming, but it still runs a very high risk of being overturned on appeal. The reason why prosecutors like to use defendant being absent sometimes to clear the deck, because who wants this huge case hanging over your head? It's too much of a burden. The resources that have gone into getting a trial ready. You don't want it hanging around. But then again, there's a downside to it. When the person is apprehended or they turn themselves in, you know their attorneys are going to file all these appeals and all these motions to have a retrial with the person present. And a lot of times the courts will relent and hold another trial because they don't want to go through the possibility that a person is going to prevail on appeal. And you're going to have to do the damn thing over anyway. The reason why I'm putting this pre-trial and during trial, early on during trial, a person who has pled not guilty can say to their lawyer, guess what? I'm not going to do this. I want to take a plea. That typically happens pretty early on in the process. And so, of course, the court is going to listen to both sides. First, the judge has to decide whether he or she is going to allow a trial to be interrupted for this process to even be entertained. Then come the stages as to whether the prosecutor wants to enter into these discussions, because the prosecutor would be thereafter steering the ship as far as even agreeing to entertain these discussions after the judge allows the trial to be interrupted, or I should say, if the judge allows the trial to be interrupted. The judge clearly can say no. And if the judge says no, he or she is going to state the reasons, obviously backed up by the law, citing the law. So the case can be halted and this process allowed, or not halted and the process not allowed. Now we're going to come to the outcomes. We know what guilty is. We know what not guilty is. You have partial verdict, which means the jury has reached a verdict on some of the charges, but not all the charges. So there's going to have to be a hearing to decide what is going to happen with this situation. Is the defendant asserting that they're going to take these guilty verdicts? Are they saying they want a retrial? They want the charges never to be brought again. The prosecutor is going to weigh in. Obviously, both sides need to be heard, and the judge will make a decision. Hung jury, when they couldn't reach an unanimous verdict, then the judge will determine whether there's going to be a mistrial. And what can happen is an appeals court can say you can't retry this person. It won't be because double jeopardy, because no verdict was reached. There could be some other catastrophic violations that occurred, and they are prohibited from bringing the charges again. It is very important that I explain this to you, because this is directly related in every way to those 5 arrest encounters that I'm going to be addressing. I extracted these out so you can see exactly what I'm referring to. Look at the first 2 cases that appear on the screen. These are convictions for domestic assault or domestic violence. Remember, I said in another video, every state does not use the same terminology. When you're talking about domestic, this involves people who have a relationship, past or current. They have cohabitated, they were married or not, they have a child in common. And Florida is really moving towards roommates. What do you think of that? They have moved towards, if you have lived with someone, even as a roommate, and you're not in a romantic relationship, you don't have children, they're starting to classify those instances as domestic violence. Very interesting. But by and large, this is the category. But let's go to the cases specifically. Now, keep in mind, you got to look at the case number and you got to look at the docket number. Are they matching? You see it here. You have the liberty to toggle back and forth if you think I'm moving too fast. This case number / docket number is 1050847. This is the case involving Remix, wherein he, at 5'11", 180 pounds, this is what the police report says, decides to cold cock his 8-year-old brother in the eye with a closed fist. Remix's mom calls the police and he takes off. This is what the affidavit, which is here on the screen, says. Now, I don't know how much the little brother weighed, most definitely under 100 pounds, unless there's an exception. But you have a grown-ass dude wailing on an 8-year-old. Here you go with the arrest encounter. Here are the numbers again. Here is the date again. Match it up. What does it say? Assault. This is the arrest encounter. Now let's look at what ended up happening with this case. Scroll down. This is the entire form, the length of the form. It says guilty plea. Go back to the beginning if you have any concerns or any challenges that you encounter, and I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being dead ass serious. This is a straight up guilty plea. It doesn't say Alfred plea. It doesn't say no contest. It wouldn't matter anyway because they're all guilty. Those pleas function in the same manner. Remix pled guilty. And the judge will ask you, are you pleading guilty because you are guilty? They go through all these questions. He pled guilty, so he is guilty of domestic abuse. Yes, it's domestic. It's not child abuse because he was not in the caretaking role. And how are we certifying this? Yes, the affidavit said that he committed domestic abuse. Domestic, it says it. But an affidavit is not the final outcome. The judgment that the court renders, certifies, and places in the record is the outcome. And you see here, match up the numbers, the case, match up the docket, and what do you see here? This is violent. This is domestic. There it is, right there. This is the conviction outcome judgment sheet in the court record. This means Remix has one conviction thus far for domestic assault or domestic violence. And I'm repeating, it's not all labeled the same. So let's go to the second case. Make sure you match up the case number. Make sure you match up the docket number. 12000695. The arrest encounter says assault. What ended up happening with this situation? Let's go see. Look at the arrest encounter. Match up the numbers and go to the affidavit. Remember, the affidavit is not a final outcome. The affidavit has to be considered by the court. Is it valid? Is it credible? The court looks at the affidavit. In this instance, Remix decides he wants to beat an ex-girlfriend with a tree limb, a tree trunk, whatever, a log, however you want to describe it here, it says it here, okay? Read it. You can read it. He beat the woman until she started to bleed, and the tree trunk or tree branch, whatever you want to call it, broke. Go down to the bottom, and what does the sentence say? What is Remix getting out of this? Probation. Says it right there, folks. Guilty plea, probation. Okay, so let's step back to the first case involving Remix punching his 8-year-old brother in the eye with a closed fist as an adult. That's 1050847. What was the outcome? We know it's a guilty plea, but what did Remix get in that case? The same thing, probation. Courts do not impose terms of probation unless there is a conviction. Now, there are times when you can strike a deal and say, if you complete the terms of probation, typically that's a year, and you have no other issues, the court can agree to discharge the case. But clearly, Remix came nowhere near meeting that criteria. He didn't even pay the fines. The fines remain outstanding. So in this instance, you have 2 convictions for domestic violence / domestic assault. 2 convictions. With the other 3 cases, you have 3 dismissals. I don't want to neglect to address the notation you see up here. What I was pointing out, these cases that involve assault/domestic assault are related to a child in one instance, and the other two instances involve ex-girlfriends. Now, the interesting part about this, there are no instances where law enforcement was involved that appear on these encounters where Remix is going after a dude and it's a straight dude on dude situation. I got into a fight at the corner store, or I got into a fight at the street, where they're just throwing down them. There is a case, I'm not going to go into all the details because Smoke and Keeping It Plain are going to cover that, where it's domestic violence and then there was some sort of intervention on behalf of the woman, or cops were hit up and offered information. The details you can get from Keeping It Plain and Smoke. But the incident was domestic violence. It wasn't the incident with the dudes. And it's a whole bizarre scenario. Be sure you check into Smoke's page, subscribe so you don't miss. Smoke goes live when he goes live. So the only way you can really catch his live streams, subscribe to his channel. He's going to go over the details. The purpose of this video was to be very clear and very specific about facts. The facts have been laid down. The facts are undeniable. The facts are certifiable. The facts are easy to confirm. There's no other wiggle room on it. It happened. It happened long before we knew Remix even existed. The first case with the little brother, the poor, helpless 8-year-old, that happened before YouTube was even created. YouTube was in 2005. He cold cocked his little brother in 2003. So there can be no YouTube manipulation. We didn't even know Remix. Everyone has a past. That past is a factor whenever you see people coming to YouTube. You can't escape the past. You are your past. You are your present. We have ourselves here on social media, here on YouTube. No matter what you say, the facts are the facts. People can jump up and say whatever they want. It doesn't change reality. It doesn't change history. It also doesn't change that you really need to heed the warning. Buyer beware.